Hi there, folks. I'd like to continue on with my little series on my favorite subgenre, which is the tragic sci-fi romance, very specialized subgenre that I became aware of and started noticing patterns of, and wanted to really started to get more interested in identifying films that belong in this category. If you have any suggestions as far as movies that you would consider to be a tragic sci-fi romance, a romance that is tragic in nature in a sci-fi kind of premise or setting, please leave me a comment or send me a message or make a video with your own thoughts on this. I may take some of your suggestions and make videos on them as well if I think they belong in this particular category. I wanted to talk about a film that came out pretty recently, fall of 2009, called The Time Traveler's Wife. And this is a movie that I didn't really know a whole lot about before seeing, but was very interested just based on its premise. And I can't say that this is really one of my favorite movies, especially not in this genre. I think that a lot of it is pretty kind of hokey and sappy and more than a little melodramatic. But I was very involved in this movie just based on the premise alone, which is quite fascinating. It's based on a novel, and I've read the novel actually since seeing the film, and I think the novel is a fuller, more complete version of the story. There's at least one important supporting character in the book that is not in the movie. But the movie is fine. The movie is decent as is, and I found it quite interesting. The premise is the main character is Eric Bana. And he is, well, I shouldn't say he is the only main character, of course, since all these are basically about a couple. All these films I'm talking about are about this relationship between two people in whatever predicament they're in. And in this case, the predicament is the guy can travel through time spontaneously and he can't control it. He just disappears and winds up in some other period of his life. And what happens is he falls in love with a woman who's played by Rachel McAdams. She is, more or less, I think, the main character of this movie, although they both get pretty much equal screen time as far as I can tell. What happens is the situation is really screwy because when he meets her for the first time, she is already aware of him and has spoken with him on many occasions dating back to when she was a little girl, because he has traveled back in time to see her. But at the point where he meets her, she already knows him quite well and has spoken with him lots of times. He doesn't know her at all. So then, of course, he travels back in time to when she was a little girl and, she meets him for the first time. It's very, very messed up. And time travel movies basically fall into two categories. One, you go back in time and you do stuff and you come forward in time, but nothing is really different because it was always that way. There was always some version of you in the past affecting things, and so it's just, it all sort of blends together. The other time travel concept, which is espoused by movies like Back to the Future and such, is you go back in time, you can change something, and your present or your future turns out differently. This is one of the former groups. So there really isn't any worry about messing with the space-time continuum because in the course of the timeline, he was always back there. Older versions of himself was always back there in the past when she was a little girl. So he's not really changing anything. Nevertheless, they sort of complain to each other at a certain point about all the difficulty they have in their relationship and the fact that he just sort of spontaneously disappears and she's left alone during Christmas or whatever. He even disappears on their wedding day, and an older version of him comes from the future back to marry her, but he's like at least 10 years older at that point, which is really, really strange. The makeup effects aren't really all that significant in this movie, so it's not like people don't recognize him any longer. They wanted to keep Eric Bana, I think, handsome looking throughout the picture, no matter what period of time he was coming from. So what happens is at a certain point, they both get in this argument. That's more like a mutual accusation of you started it, which is you didn't have to come back in time and talk with me. You could have stayed hidden away. You could have not had any contact with me whatsoever. And and he says to her, well, you didn't have to approach me in the library either when I didn't even know you. You could have done that, and that would have changed things as well. So each of them sort of is equally at fault for for perpetuating this very sort of temporal, messed up relationship. But they do care about each other very much. And there are a few other things that happen when they're in their married life together that I'm not going to get into because they were a surprise for me when they happened. And I'd like them for you to be a surprise as well if you choose to see the movie, if you haven't already. I will say that as far as the movie versus book, the movie actually improves on the book in one way, and that's the ending. The ending, I thought, was a little bit too vague and ambiguous in the book. And I like the ending in the film much better. I think it works better. It's neater. But it is quite sad, actually, at times. And there's this knowledge that they're never really going to have a mutually convenient relationship because he keeps jumping around in time, against his will. And this, makes her upset, makes him upset, but they still care about each other, so they still want to be together anyway. So there is a tragic element to this story. I like I said, it's not one of my favorite movies in this type of film, but I do recommend it for those of you who are interested in this type of story, as I would be. Thanks very much. I'll have more films in this subgenre for you quite soon. Thanks for watching, and take it easy.